and Ohio State looking the part for the most part tonight. Not a just butt kicking, but we have to remember that Penn State, despite the result against Indiana, is still fielding a roster of top 10 talent, missing their best defensive player who's opted out and is going to the NFL draft, of course. And one of their top linebackers, Jesse Luketa, missed the first half because of targeting against Indiana. Journey Brown out, of course, probably for the entire season. And his backup, Noah Cain, who was a top-flight running back coming out of high school and had a productive year last year. So Penn State, as I mentioned a number of times since last week's game against Indiana, and even before they played the Hoosiers, probably a more different team than any team in the country in games 1 and 2 versus the personnel and the team that we expected it to be in the offseason. So that's not an excuse for James Franklin, but bad things have happened to Penn State. Jahan Dotson did show up and probably exposed Ohio State's biggest weakness right now, and that's coverage in the secondary. If they don't get a real pass rush on the quarterback, they've had issues covering in this game. Not necessarily against Nebraska. Nebraska didn't move the ball downfield. They completed a lot of passes, but everything was underneath and did not extend the field. But Sean Clifford and Jahan Dotson in particular have extended the field and stretched the field, and Sevyn Banks is lost in coverage in particular.
Voice of college football, Mark Rogers. How you doing this evening, sir?
Hey, David. How are you?
Excellent. I see some of the folks in the live chat. Maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic or a little bit more pleased with this performance than some of the other folks out there. But, I thought overall, the Buckeyes did what they had to do. I thought the offensive line looked good. We were able to run the ball when we needed to. Obviously, Justin Fields is really good. Our receivers continue to make plays. And I thought the defensive line and linebackers played a much better game this week. So I think there's a lot of good here, Mark. What's your overall evaluation, and do you agree with me?
Well, I'll just reiterate what I told the last caller. The only concern that I had was that I thought the secondary was a bit lost. Other than that, obviously, there are plays made by the other team. I think that people lose this sight of that there are athletes on the other side, and many of them will be playing in the NFL. So right. It's the other team's going to make plays, and especially when you're playing one of the 10 to 15 best rosters in the country. So I wasn't that concerned with anything other than think the coverage is a bit loose. I don't know why Sevyn Banks in particular, I saw this a few times, why he's playing 8 and 10 yards off a receiver when the ball's at like the 18-yard line. Like when I think it was even closer to the goal line than that. He's basically got his heels on the goal line. He's not going to get beat to the, if he's going to get beat to the corner, then they're going to have to throw a perfect pass. So why are you giving up an 8 or 9 yard pass play in front of you when you're standing on the goal line practically? I don't understand that.
Well, sure. If you look at that first drive, that they had to make it 21-13 to start the second half, they were getting a lot of underneath stuff because Ohio State was playing off. They weren't playing press man in those situations. They were playing off coverage, giving them 6-7 yards cushion. And, that allows Clifford to just say, hey, I get the ball out here quick, take these short games. And they did that all the way down the field to get that touchdown and make it 21-13. I will say this. First of all, I didn't think Clifford looked all that bad, by the way. I know you said some of his inconsistencies. I don't think he's got a whole lot of help around him. Although I think they may have found something with that Dodson on the outside, by the way. He made a couple of really nice catches. I know some of the people have said, and I know Sean Wade got beat a couple of times, but 2 of the catches were where Sean Wade was right there in coverage. So it wasn't as if, the coverage was bad on a couple of those catches. And now a few of the other ones, the coverage could have been a little bit better. But he made a couple nice catches. And finally, it looked like they had a legitimate wide receiver there. Because, as I told you earlier in the week, I was not necessarily impressed with their weapons.
Sure.
Did you notice that as well?
Yeah, well, I know that Jahan Dotson was a 5-star coming out of high school, and he has shown flashes. So I
Right.
certainly not surprised that he made plays. He's they've had trouble at receiver the last several seasons since can't think of the one that transferred to Oklahoma, Geno and Deshaun Hamilton and those guys. And then the one that I'm missing names. The other one that transferred to Oregon. Oh my goodness, Jawan Johnson.
Oh, is it Johnson? Okay.
But yeah, there's my summary of the game, pretty much.
I would have also found it interesting. I mean, if they would have had those two other running backs, the Jordy Brown and Noah King, I thought that would have also made things interesting. If their roster was fully healthy, it would have been interesting to see that game as well. But, I mean, I still think Ohio State's a better football team. And, I kind of feel the same way that I did a year ago. I think the Buckeyes are at least 2 scores better than everybody else in the Big Ten, if not more. 2 or more scores better than anybody else in this conference.
Sure.
And I don't see that changing going forward. Although I tell you what, it would have been interesting. I think the team that would have been interesting to watch, because I feel like Graham Mertz would have been Wisconsin going forward before this whole situation hit. They would have been an interesting team to watch, don't you think, Mark?
Well, sure. They're always interesting to watch. They're always somebody to be reckoned with.
Well, I was just saying that too because it looked like Mertz might be the first really good quarterback that they've had since, because like I said, they really haven't had a big name quarterback since Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
So it's been a bunch of kind of game manager quarterbacks, over the last few years. So I think that Mertz could have given them some quarterback play that they hadn't seen in going on 9 years since they had Russell Wilson. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, you can look at it that way. You can also look at it that their running game doesn't look to be anything close to what it typically is.
True, but it's a quarterback-driven sport, though, right now, Mark.
It is. It doesn't. It hasn't been for them, and they've been successful. But
true.
Yeah. So we will see if they can get back on the field.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The next couple of weeks will be interesting. Hey, a couple of thoughts on that Michigan State game, by the way. Yeah, those corners did not look good for Michigan. They were definitely exposed. And I didn't know that, Michigan, if it was necessarily Rocky Lombardi and those Sparty receivers making plays, and I give them a lot of credit for making plays, but yeah, I don't see any Leon Halls back there. I certainly don't see any Charles Woodsons. I don't see any, some of the corners that they've had in the past. I don't see any really top-notch cover corners back there. And when they need any team that can throw the ball, their defense is really going to be in trouble.
Yeah, their corners struggled, and not just the 2 corners, but their slot corners inside. Everybody struggled. Daxton Hill's a tremendous player, though. So they do have one proven excellent player. I wasn't tracking exactly everybody who was making mistakes, but it was number 4 and number 22, Jalen Perry, and I can't remember the other player's name, that were consistently either holding, interfering legitimately, or they were just getting burned. And the thing that I will say about Michigan State connecting on those long throws is they had to make decent plays on the ball and decent throws to connect. Like guys weren't completely wide open. Like they were throwing the ball proficiently downfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
I was impressed with Michigan State throwing the ball downfield.
Yeah. I didn't know if they necessarily. I didn't really know about Rocky Lombardi or their receivers and their capabilities of doing that. I will say this. On the other side of the ball, and I put this in your chat earlier after the game, I don't think Milton's, receivers were doing them any favors in that game with some drops, and it just didn't seem like they were getting separation either. So, I know that there was a feeling out there that their receivers could be as good or better than they were a year ago, but I didn't see it today. Did you?
Well, I saw it against Minnesota, is what I
Right.
thought I saw. But then we saw Minnesota get torched the next week, so against Maryland, of all teams. So again, it's a week by week. You get more information and you see another game, and you can get high about Michigan one week, and considering
Sure.
that you think Minnesota's a pretty good team, and then you see Minnesota lose to Maryland, and so that adjusts the thinking about Michigan. And then, of course, they go out and lose to Michigan State. It's just an accumulation of information and play on the field that needs to be evaluated. But I had people contacting me saying, "Yeah, Michigan sucks," and whatever. Yeah, whatever. If you think Michigan sucks, then everybody but 15 teams in the country suck. So everybody sucks except for the team that's going to win the national championship. Some people take that tone that everybody sucks. So.
Well, yeah, in the playoff era, I think everybody's saying unless you're, getting that punch or close to it, it doesn't really much matter anymore. That's why I think that the playoff system is kind of like, pretty much made it to where there's 4 teams that matter, and then that's pretty much it. Nobody really thinks that much of the other teams, and teams that might even be playing in good bowl games because of the playoff nowadays.
Yeah, unfortunately. And I'm not making an excuse for Michigan and saying that their play is acceptable, because it's not, because they're paying a coach top 3 money in the country. They're Michigan. They're supposed to be competing for championships, or maybe some younger people who are in the chat are probably like, they are. Yeah, they're supposed to be competing for championships. They haven't for 15 years. But so they're not getting the job done. They've leveled off to a comfortable 9-3. I guess it's comfortable depending on whom you are. 9-3 type program, and I don't think most Michigan fans. I was looking at a number of Michigan articles before I came on just to get some perspective, and doesn't seem like people are very happy, and they shouldn't be.
Sure. Yeah. If you want 9-3, you can pay Brady Hope to get 9-3. You're not paying a coach the top 3 money in the country to get 9-3.
Yeah, well, I don't know that Brady Hook was quite getting them there, but
my opinion of the game was, a lot of what you said was true in terms of a lot of people are overestimating the problem that OSU has, and they kind of don't want to give credit to teams who are perennial powers just because they are as good as Ohio State, and we have to acknowledge that sometimes guards are going to be chicken out there and everything like that. And one of my main problems with OSU this year was just based off of the hype and everything that our interior was getting for just our straight A-gaps, right? So that would be Wyatt, Josh Myers, Harry Miller.
Yep.
All of them are 5-stars. All of them were projected to be first-round picks. So I understand our limitations at running back in terms of how good they are relative to what we've had at Ohio State. But at the same time, I feel like we're not in the push requisite of the hype they had coming into the season. What's your whole opinion on that?
Well, I know against Nebraska they didn't get the push. They had those 4 short yardage situations where they couldn't get a half a yard for a first down. And that all came from the interior that you're talking about, the 2 guards in the center. So that's troubling. But it's one game, so I want to see that play out. Now, tonight, everything that comes to mind in the run game was, I think J.K. Dobbins turned 5-yard runs into 12-yard runs, and sometimes he turned them into 60-yard runs. I just don't think that they have that back. I think they have a very deep stable of running backs. I think they're 3 to 4 deep with capable runners, but I don't think they have J.K. Dobbins. So I think they got plenty of push. I bet if we charted every running play tonight, I bet 3/4 of them, they got a reasonable push or crease or hole for the back to gain reasonable yardage. I think down through the years that most coaches prove to be pretty conservative by nature, and they go with what they know and they go with what they're comfortable with. And most coaches are comfortable with experience. And so if Ryan Day believes that, let's put it this way, every elite team is not elite in every positional unit. That's just not feasible. It's not reasonable. Now, you can't have a position unit that's so weak that it's the 12th best in the Big Ten. But I would think Ohio State in every positional unit's in the top 3 to 4 in the Big Ten. And if linebacker since pretty much Raekwon McMillan left in 2017 on, it's been probably the weakest position on the team. But it hasn't been bad. Now, in 2017, for most of that season, in 2018, it was bad for much of that season. I thought that they were improved dramatically last year, but were they elite? No, they weren't elite. But I also think we have to understand that there is so much more asked of these linebackers playing against these spread offenses and covering tight ends and backs out of the backfield than 10 years ago. And so they still have to be pretty physical players, but they have to cover so much more space now than they used to that they are going to give up plays.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's one of the problems with top position teams, like athletically limited. But yeah. So my last question was, it would be about there seems to be this transition from right guard to center that OSU's been doing for like the past 5-6 years, right? And if you look at the trends, you had like Billy Price to Jacoby Bourne, or Jacoby Bourne to Billy Price, and Billy Price to Pat Eplin, and Malcolm Christian, Michael Jordan. But the thing is, like when you look at how those players perform in the NFL, none of them really have long-lasting careers. And in theory, what they're trying to say is it gives you more versatility on the interior of the offensive line, but that hasn't really produced any tangible benefit. So my question would be, do you think that they're doing their interior linemen a disservice by switching them around in the offensive line in their careers at Ohio State?
Well, I think that while a place like Ohio State and in other schools, certainly for a recruiting tool, want to sell themselves as being a stepping stone to the NFL, because that's what players at that level are searching for, and even unrealistically, many of them are. They want to hear that they have that kind of ability and believe that they can move on to that level. So that's a main recruiting tool. But once those players get on campus, as long as a place like Ohio State is developing them as players, I don't think they have an obligation to them to mold them in the best way possible for them to be NFL prospects and to play well at the NFL level. They're trying to win games at their level.
Yeah.
I don't think they have any obligation to anybody.
Yeah, and that's true. That's what I was thinking. It's kind of like when you think about it from a macrocosmic long-term situation, it's like a disservice to all of the people who play those two positions. And that's my whole thing about it. Kind of misleading, honestly. But yeah. And my last question is about what's your take on Jeff Happy's impact at OSU and how much credit he actually deserves for what happened last year for the Ohio State defense?
That's a great call. Well, I would think that he would deserve considerable credit, considering that they were so bad for most of 2018. Now, they did improve the last 3 games of 2018. They were much better, but they were still far from elite.